Hi guys, I hope that you're all doing well. In today's lesson, we'll do more basic calculations. And remember, from part 2, we are to continue from cash sales and credit sales. So in terms of the cash sales and credit sales, you might be given the percentage of sales that are cash sales. And I've written down the formula. You don't really need to know these formulas by head. You just need to know how to multiply. So for cash sales, you have to say total sales times cash sales percentage. Then for credit sales, you have a total sales minus cash sales. Now, for cash sales, if you have to find the percentage, we'll take the amount that we've been given and multiply it with the cash sales percentage, basically the percentage that we have. In terms of the credit sales, if it's a bit confusing, remember in a business, there are two ways in which you can sell something: on cash or credit. Here we have our total sales, meaning we have our cash and credit combined. So we have a total sales here. When you subtract our cash sales, what are we left with? Our credit sales. Credit sales plus cash sales is equal to total sales. You guys will see this in the first example. Let's try number 1. Total sales are 100,000 Rand. 30% of the cash, 30% are cash sales, So we have 100,000 Rand that we made from the total sales. And they tell us that 30% are cash sales. So 30% of 100,000 Rand gives you your cash sales. Now, what is left? The 70% is our credit sales. Now let's multiply. Let's find our cash sales. You have to say 100,000 Rand times 30%. 100,000 Rand times 30% is 30,000 Rand. Okay. The 30,000 Rand is your cash sales. You still don't have a credit sales. So how can we find our credit sales? We can say the total sales, which is 100,000 Rand. Let me say credit sales. You have to take 100,000 Rand and subtract our cash sales, which is 30,000 Rand. 100,000 Rand minus 30,000 Rand is 70,000 Rand. The 70,000 Rand is your credit sales. And again, as I've said, there are two ways in which you can sell something. You can sell it on cash or credit. So if they tell you that that 30% of something is your cash sales, that means the remaining is your credit sales. So you can easily say 30%, we have 30%, right? Remember, we always have 100%. So you have to say 100% minus 30%, which is 70%. So if you don't want to subtract, as I've done here, you can just say the 100,000 Rand times 70%, as that is what's remaining. We always have 100. However, 30% is cash sales, 70% is credit sales. 100 minus 30 is 70. 100,000 Rand times 70% should give you 70,000 Rand. So you still get the same answer. Guys, I know that accounting can be very confusing, but this is a very easy example. These are basic stuff. Don't overthink and think that there's some fancy formula. These are straightforward calculations. Now let's try another example. Let's try number 2. Total sales are 250,000 Rand. 40% are cash sales. How do you find the cash sales? You have to take a 250,000 Rand, which is the total sales, right? Multiply it with 40%. 250,000 times 40% should give you 100,000 Rand. The 100,000 Rand is your cash sales. To find the credit sales, there are two ways. We can take a 250,000 Rand and multiply it with 40% are cash sales. So we can say, we always have 100 minus 40, which is 60%. So we can take this 250,000 Rand, multiply it with 60%, and we get 150,000 Rand. Credit sales. What's another method? The total sales are 250,000 Rand. So you can take this 250,000 rand and subtract our cash sales, which is 100,000 rand. What's left? Our credit sales. So 250 minus 100 has to be 150,000 rand. Let's try the third example. Cash sales amounted to 60,000 rand and represented 30% of total sales. Calculate the total sales for the period. What should we do? We have 60,000 rand and it represents 30% of the total sales. We basically have to work backwards. As soon as it's phrased weird and as soon as it doesn't look familiar, just remember that you usually need to work backwards, not forward. So we have to take a 60,000 rand. How do we do this again? 60,000 rand. We did this in the previous video. Divide it with 30%, which is 200,000 rand. So the total sales are 200,000 rand. Guys, this might actually be a new question. I just checked the example that we did, and I think I might have to explain this again. In grade 12, let me write this down. When you're given a part of its percentage and ask for the whole, you need to use this formula. Whole is equal to part over percentage. We did whole is equal to part divided by percentage. Let me just say divided by percentage. Here we were given 60,000 rand and they said it represents 30% of the total sales. Calculate the total cash sales for that period. You have to work backwards. So you have to take our whole, which is 60,000 rand, and then part divided by part, which is 30%. So we said whole, which is 60,000 rand, divided by 30%, the percentage, and we got 200,000 rand. We'll do more examples as time goes on. For now, it's just simple calculations that you need to know. We'll do more examples and everything will repeat itself as time goes on. Now let's go to number 7. We have debtors collections. This is very important in cash budget questions. You guys need to know how to collect money. Some questions might say things like 60% of credit sales are collected in the month of sale, then 30% in the following month, and then 10% is written off or collected later. You must determine how much money is actually received using the percentages that you've been given. And as I've said, we're only doing some basic calculations. For the complex part, such as the debtors collection schedule, I know that you guys might be thinking of this. We'll do so in the 7th video, if not the 8th or the 9th. So for now, we just want to try some basic examples. So to solve this, I don't really need to write down the formula as you won't really need it, but it's actually relevant credit sales times collection percentage. For example, let's start with number 1. We have credit sales in January 100,000 rand. And let's say the relevant calculation or the relevant percentage is 60%. They tell you that 60% is collected in January. Okay. You have to say 100,000 rand times 60%, which is 60,000 rand. So the cash received from January debtors in January is 60,000 rand. Let's try the second example. Let's say February credit sales are 150,000 rand. They give you the full amount. Okay, excuse me, the credit sales amount. They tell you that 40% is collected in March. it won't always be this straightforward. They always try to trick you guys. So to solve this, you have to say 150,000 rand times 40%, which is 60,000 rand. So the cash received in March from February, debtors is 60,000 rand. If you don't understand this, it's okay. We'll do more examples. So this is an important exam trick. If the question says 20% collected in current month, let's say 70% following month, 10% 2 months later, you must look at the previous month's credit sales when calculating the current month's debtor receipts. I can write this down for you guys. So if the question says 20% collected in current month, 70% following month, 10% 2 months later, you have to look at the previous month's credit sales when calculating the current month's debtor receipts. I know this sounds a bit confusing. I would love to do a few examples for you guys, but remember, this is a huge topic on its own, so I don't really want to rush through it. Let's go to creditors payments.